This is Volusia Today, a public information radio program brought to you by the County of Volusia. Here is your host, Kevin Captain.
Good morning and welcome to Volusia Today. I'm Kevin Captain, and today I'm joined by co-host Clayton Jackson. Thank you so much for tuning in this morning. Volusia Today is made possible by our sponsors, the Daytona Beach International Airport, the Ocean Center, Volusia Recycles, and Votran Public Transportation. Good morning, Clayton.
Good morning, Kevin. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. We've got part two today, Clayton, with Jessica Fentress, our Coastal Director, and Ben Bartlett, our Public Works Director. We're going to talk more about coastal recovery and the future of Volusia County's coast.
Resiliency efforts.
Yeah, speaking of resiliency, so Jessica, Ben, we received $37.6 million from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. And part of that allocation of money with the agreement, the grant agreement, I understand we have to do a resiliency study. And, we've heard people like, why do we have to spend the money doing the study? Why can't we just get the sand and put it on there? But the study is a very important element when we're spending this kind of money. Talk to us about that.
So you hit a very good note. There is the concern of why do we have to spend time doing this study and not put sand on the beach? We're doing them simultaneously. We are working through the draft scope of our feasibility study, and what it's going to do is it's going to take a look at our historical shoreline performance. So where has the shoreline been over the last century? We have the ability to go back that far and see what our accretion and our erosion rates are along the shoreline. It will also help us identify long-term hotspots for erosion areas and sand accretion. What you'll hear in the coastal community is you don't look at a coastline in a matter of weeks. We all know the tide changes it every single day. You don't look at it on months. You don't look at it on years. You don't look at it on decades. You look at coastal change in centuries. So we're trying to put together a plan for the next 50 years on how we can maintain our coastline in the long term. They'll look at historical shoreline performance. They'll identify hotspot areas for erosion, which will help to prioritize projects in the long term. And it will also match sand sources offshore with unique areas along our coastline. The sand in Bethune is not the same sand in Daytona Beach. The sand in Ormond Beach is not the same sand in North New Smyrna. So we have specific pockets of sand located offshore that you're probably aware of in other areas where they dredge that sand and put it on our beaches. We're going to match those offshore sources with locations on our beaches that are the highest priority based on the data review. And then that will basically put together priority areas. We're going to take that information out to our community for feedback. What does Ponce Inlet want their beach to look like? Do you want a beach nourishment program where the beach is expanded? Does Daytona want to keep a dune system? Do we want, what do we want to see?
A lot of questions.
A lot of questions, a lot of opportunity for education with our community and feedback from them on what they want to see, because ultimately it will be public dollars that pay for this. And then simultaneously, we are working right now to get an engineer on board. We had our solicitation close last week. We had 4 respondents. They're all very high qualified respondents. Hopefully, we will be taking a proposed contract to our county council in May. For an engineering consultant to start the design and the permitting and creating construction documents for sand placement on our beaches for 500,000 cubic yards coming from the Florida Inland Navigation District's Rattlesnake Island, which is on the southwest corner of our inlet. And we are working with the Corps of Engineers still. We have a meeting next week on Thursday to talk about offloading 700,000 cubic yards from the upcoming Corps' Inlet and IECW dredging project. We will be sending specialized easements out to a couple of areas that we're looking to use for staging some of this sand. We've already been in contact with those residents. We're only looking at about a dozen or so. But we're running the feasibility study simultaneously with the sand placement project. And both of these are requirements of our grant agreement.
And I think it's important to note, Jessica mentioned the 500,000 cubic yards at Rattlesnake Island. That's in addition to 180,000 that we got from Florida Inland Navigation District from their Edgewater pit. That's all work that we're doing, working with those partners to get that sand essentially for free. I mean, we got to pay to get it onto the beach, right, but we're getting it for free. Where in some folks, just the sand itself can cost up to $20 to $30 a yard. And this Army Corps project to dredge the inlet was planned years in advance, and their initial plan was to take that sand, and basically dump it out in 12 feet of water. Obviously, given the need for sand on the beach, we've reached out to the U.S. Army Corps and, worked with them, implored them, begged them to say, hey, you guys are generating a lot of sand that we can put on the beach, in a time when beach compatible sand is at a premium. Work with us. And getting the federal government, getting the U.S. Army Corps to move on something is kind of like trying to make a sharp turn in an aircraft carrier. It's not easy. But, working with our partners, working with them, making them understand the situation, they are coming to the table. And if we can get that sand put on the beach in an area where we can easily redeploy it and re-nourish portions of our beach, would be a huge win for Volusia County.
Well, I would definitely want to talk more about the dredging, but you threw out some numbers there with what will come from Rattlesnake Island and some of the other areas. It sounds like a big number, but what does it really translate to for those of us that really don't know how to measure all that?
If you ever seen one of those dump trucks running around, like just a tandem wheeled dump truck that's doing construction, that carries 18 cubic yards of material. So take 500,000 yards and divide that by 18. And
Jessica's doing the math now.
I can't do that in my head. Our finance director could do it in his head, but I can't.
Ryan's already got it figured out.
That's how much sand we're getting, and
so it's a lot.
I think the typical, some of the profiles you look at, maybe 20 yards per linear foot, for a decent sand berm or sand dune, sand berm along the beach, something like that. So the more sand that we can acquire easily and readily available, the more sand we can deploy, the more we can stretch that money that the state has provided us.
Which is certainly good. I mean, but it probably is still a small amount when compared to, I remember Jessica mentioned after the storms, the beach profile was deflated by a minimum or average of like 4 feet or more in some areas. So that's got to be a whole heck of a lot of sand.
It is. It'll blow your mind on how much sand this really is.
Yep, and I would like to ask about timelines, but at the same time, with the upcoming hurricane season, you never know what could happen. A storm or two could put us behind schedule and so forth. But speaking of the upcoming hurricane season, was it Colorado? Who was that, Kevin, that put that out?
Yeah, that's Colorado State University. So they come out with a hurricane forecast, and they recently came out with the 2023 Atlantic hurricane season forecast, and they have they're talking about El Nino as a primary factor coming in, and we've been in this La Nina. But what that does is we'll have to get Jim Judge in here to have him explain it. But it kind of gives more of an effect with like the westerly winds. But their crystal globe says 13 named storms, 6 hurricanes, 2 major hurricanes. But I don't know. Do we Ben? Would you rely on that?
But they're saying it's fewer than average. So is that time to everybody to take a deep breath?
No, absolutely not. I've always, and I'm sure they've got some very good experts in Colorado State. I've always been interested as to why the hurricane prediction comes out of Colorado. I don't think they've ever seen that before, but I'm sure they've got some really smart people over there that look at it. But at the end of the day, average season, above average season, below average season, it just takes one storm to hit.
Not even hit.
Yeah. One storm to pass.
Turn in the Atlantic for a week and a half, and we've got swell that could hurt us.
Right. And then, it just takes that one close call or hit to really do damage. And so, in the public works side of things, I don't know how much we pay attention to the predictions, but when hurricane season starts spinning up and we see one form out there in the water, that's when we start getting nervous. But I will say you got to prepare. We always prepare every year in advance of hurricane season. Public works staff meets with our public works counterparts and emergency management counterparts from everywhere in the county, and we're always looking at past performance during storms and things that we can improve. So it's a continuous process, and we never assume that we're out of the woods until probably December.
Definitely good advice. I mean, don't listen necessarily to the predictions. Still make a plan, get a plan. Like you said, all it takes is one storm, And on our emergency management page, we've got lots of resources for residents, visitors, just what do you need for your plan, and what do y'all need to have, stored at your home.
And I will say,
prepared.
based on what happened in the last storm, think about, a flooding situation. You might have been in an area that hadn't flooded before. And if you're in a low area, think about how you're going to get out and be prepared for that.
For sure. Well, we're talking with Ben Bartlett, the Public Works Director, and Jessica Fentress, our Coastal Director with Volusia County. We'll take a quick break and come back. And Ben, let's maybe talk a little bit more about the flooding. That's certainly another hot topic. Stay with us.
Subscribe to the Volusia County YouTube channel.
And hit the bell icon to know what's happening in your hometown.
There are so many great places to explore.
And things to learn.
With over 1,000 videos available right now, the channel offers something for everyone.
Let's go!
Did you know we have countless features showcasing history, nature, wildlife, and recreation? Subscribe and hit the bell icon.
Or that we live stream important county meetings and workshops where leaders make decisions that can impact our everyday lives. Did you subscribe yet?
Or that we record our weekly radio show, Volusia Today, where we interview staff from the different divisions and departments across our great county, and they discuss the nitty-gritty of their field and expertise.
Go ahead, subscribe.
But that's not it. There's more. Subscribe and hit the bell icon and fully explore.
Score!
We're back. I'm Clayton Jackson, along with Kevin Captain, and you're listening to Volusia Today, a public information program brought to you by the County of Volusia. So we've been talking a lot about coastal recovery efforts and flooding along the coast. But as we all know, we experienced with Hurricane Ian that pretty much our entire county flooded. So Ben, do you want to talk a little bit about flooding, not just related to the coast, but throughout Volusia County?
Sure. So, I can remember back sitting in the EOC about a day before Ian hit, and the predictions on the rainfall totals were up in the 20s for Volusia County, which was, as a public works director, former road and bridge director, work a lot with stormwater. I knew that was going to be a huge concern. And so for people to understand the magnitude of the storm that Hurricane Ian was, an 24-hour storm, or a 100-year storm event over a 24-hour period results in 11 inches of rain. So you get 11 inches of rain in 24 hours. That is a 100-year storm event. We got almost double that in large portions of the county. It could be anywhere upwards of a 500 to 1,000-year storm event. That's the magnitude of the amount of water we received. And then you couple that with the shore conditions, the increased tide conditions that we experienced. Mm-hmm. It was just a total trifecta of damage. So on the west side of the county, we're subject to what the St. Johns River does. 1,200 square miles of the St. Johns River Basin experienced a 100-year storm event over 24 hours. All that water goes in the St. Johns River, and it's one of the slower, least elevated rivers in the world.
Because it goes north, too.
It goes north, but it only falls, at sea level, it goes from about 10 feet of fall from here to Jacksonville. So, the St. Johns River staged up and saw flooding elevations that nobody's ever seen before. On the west side of the county is a lot of closed basins. In other words, there's no natural outfall. So there's essentially a series of bowls that fill up with water. You've seen that in places like Deltona and parts of DeLand. And so, that amount of rain is going to cause a significant amount of flooding that no stormwater system is really designed to handle. That's just, as an engineer, we don't design stormwater systems to 500-year storm events. It's just not something you can do.
Well, and I remember talking about it with you right after the storm. We had some inquiries about, people coming into neighborhoods and can you pump it out, but where are you going to pump it to?
Right, exactly. If you're pumping it to the river, if you're in Stone Island or you're in Lake Harney Woods or Astor and you want to pump out, you can't. You're pumping to the St. Johns River. It's just going to come back. It's just like on the east side with the elevated tides. You had elevated tides. Everything wants to drain out to the ocean. If you're below a certain elevation, nothing's draining out. Roughly 8 feet is what you saw during Ian. So on the east side of the county, everything flushed out once the tides, but it still caused significant damage. And like I said before, just because you're not in a floodplain doesn't mean you're not at risk for flooding in these events. Look what's going on in Fort Lauderdale. They received, I think, 20 plus inches of rain, 26 inches of rain, a very comparable rain event to what we saw in Volusia County over a 24-hour period. And I mean, their airport's underwater. Yeah. So, there's when you get that much rain and in a short amount of time, there's areas that are going to flood. And my recommendation to folks is, hey, just because you're on a floodplain doesn't mean you shouldn't have flood insurance. Because if you flooded and you don't have flood insurance, you're not covered. And if you're not in a floodplain, typically flood insurance can be considerably less expensive. So I would advise everybody to get flood insurance, regardless of whether they're in a floodplain, and have a plan on how to get out should you flood. And
our emergency services director, Jim Judge, I'm just going to plug in for him because I've heard him say this time and time again. Just like you said, Ben, everybody needs flood insurance. I actually heard Jim speak a few years ago. He said, everybody in this room, there's an easy way to tell if you need flood insurance. Pull out your driver's license. Everybody did. He said, if you have a driver's license that says Florida on it, you need flood insurance. And that always stuck with me. But again, just for our listeners out there, there's a common misconception that just because you have homeowners insurance that encompasses flood protection. It does not. Most policies, homeowners insurance policies, do not cover flooding. That would be a separate policy you would have to add on. And again, as we are approaching the 2023 hurricane season, that flood insurance, typically it takes about a month, around 30 days, for it to become effective from the date you sign the policy. So it's too late. Jim said he hears this all the time, that there's the forecast is here comes a hurricane in the next few days. People are calling their insurance agent saying, hey, throw on flood insurance for me. And they have to say, oh, we can do that, but we're just letting you know it's not going to go into effect for another 30 days. So this right now is the time to be thinking about flood insurance, to contact your insurance agent. I think on FEMA's website, I can't remember the website off the top of my head, but it's a flood insurance program through FEMA that we strongly encourage our residents to look into.
Good point, Clayton. And again, just to reiterate, for those that don't live in a flood zone, you still need to have the coverage.
Yeah, I would, your house is typically your most valuable asset. And if you're not in a flood zone, typically it's $300 to $400 a year. And so that's
a drop in the bucket
to pay to cover the cost of, because flood damage can really destroy a home.
Talking puns here already, right? Let's go back to dredging just a little bit, because you talked about the project and the work that we will be doing eventually with the Army Corps of Engineers. What does that process look like? I have heard from previous conversations from you, Jessica, that is a huge process to dredge, to transport, to move sand, and it's clearly not an overnight process.
No. The Army Corps of Engineers typically does a routine maintenance dredging of our inlet and our intercoastal waterway in coordination with the Florida Inland Navigation District about every 5 years. So as Ben stated earlier, this is a project that has been in the works for years. Anybody that works with the federal government knows they do not pivot very quickly. So we are very grateful that they are pivoting with us to try and take advantage of this opportunity. So we've got a couple of more meetings with the Corps to kind of solidify our plan. We have an engineer that we are going through a solicitation process on now. The engineer will be working with the Corps and with us and with the Florida Inland Navigation District, and the DEP also has to permit this project. So even the federal government has to get a permit from the state to do this work. We're going to work very closely with them. The way that I envision this happening is the Corps will do their dredging. They will do it hydraulically, which is basically like a screw on the end of a vacuum hose that screws into the sand, sucks it up, liquefies it. It will go on the beach. It will be staged on the beach, and then the county will have a solicitation that will go out for a contractor to haul this sand across our coastline. If the Corps of Engineers goes north, Rattlesnake Sand will go south. So we will have sand opportunities throughout our coastline for affected areas.
And the dredging is a maintenance dredging that the Corps routinely performs of our intercoastal waterway, the navigable channel through there as well as through the inlet because over time you get shoaling, you get sand buildup, and so they come in periodically and do that to maintain navigable access through the ICW and through the Ponce Inlet.
And you mentioned about the different types of sand that we have just in our county coastline. Will the dredging go to procure those different types, or will that be based on the resiliency study?
So if you think about how the sand gets into our inlet, it's coming from either the Ponce beaches or it's coming from your New Smyrna beaches. So the dredging of this material, and it comes through the inlet and then it makes its way through our intercoastal waterways. So that's the entrance point. This sand will be very typical that you will see in North New Smyrna and Ponce Inlet area. It will be the white crystal silicate that we're used to.
I think when she talked about the dredging locations in relation to the feasibility study, what there's two different things. There's the maintenance dredging of the inlet in the intercoastal, and then there's the dredging that would occur as part offshore to facilitate sand projects in the future. So you have to get those offshore areas permitted in advance. So we get a storm, we lose a bunch of sand, boom, we're ready to go, and we have locations offshore identified where they go out and dredge and pull the sand, and not necessarily stockpile, but locations out in the water where they can pull the sand and bring it on shore. And that would be a direct response to needing sand on our beach. The ICW and inlet dredging is really something they do periodically, and we just happened to coincide with this event, and we're asking the feds to pivot and provide us that sand that they would normally just
Was it irony or was it not, right? All right, we're talking with Ben Bartlett, Public Works Director, and Jessica Fentress, Coastal Director with the county. We'll take our last break and come back and finish up Volusia Today. Stay with us.
Subscribe to the Volusia County YouTube channel.
Let's go!
There are so many great places to explore.
And things to learn.
We have countless features showcasing history, nature, wildlife, and recreation. Subscribe and hit the bell icon.
Go ahead, subscribe.
But that's not it. There's more. Subscribe and hit the bell icon and fully explore.
Score!
We're back. I'm Clayton Jackson, along with Kevin Captain, and you're listening to Volusia Today, a public information program brought to you by the County of Volusia. So, Jessica, again, we just come off 2 historic storms, and I just have to ask, what has the county learned from going through something that we have never experienced before, and how can this help us? Hopefully, it never happens again, but what lessons have we learned, and how could we potentially apply them if we ever run into similar storms of this nature?
It's not just the county learning lessons. Let's go all the way back to Surfside when we had that horrific accident where a high-rise condominium fell to the ground, and we have massive loss of life. We, in our coastline on the east coast of America, and probably the west coast, I'm not sure, but we have never experienced a situation where we have dozens of high-rises that become structurally at risk, where they have to be hard evacuated in the middle of a storm. We are learning, DEM is learning, FEMA is learning, DEP is learning. We've already been in contact with DEM and DEP and our municipalities. We will be setting up a meeting to discuss our immediate response and recovery plan should we be unfortunate enough to get a storm of significance this summer. Long term, I truly expect the book to be rewritten based on how we're doing our recovery efforts in Volusia County.
We are rewriting, or not, we are authoring the book, right? I mean, we've even got legislative activity. We've got resiliency committees now in the House and the Senate, and this is kind of the new talk of resiliency for the future.
I see a lot of improvements and modification to the current coastal construction control line permitting program entirely. While retreat is always the preferred method in every case, you have property rights, and property owners have a right to repair their property. So we need to make sure that our rules are not from 2008 and they are, within immediate response and lessons learned of this incident.
Definitely good point. Ben, when you were talking about the inlet before, what's the status of the jetty? Because that got significant damage as well too, right?
Yes, the jetty was under construction by the Army Corps of Engineer project. They had a contractor in town. The Corps of Engineers is currently in a contract dispute with that contractor.
Okay.
The county has a plan, and we are moving forward with our plan to extend the concrete jetty fishing deck to help secure the integrity of our jetty until the Corps and the contractor can come to a resolution. The Corps is aware of the concerns. We've expressed it to them. We believe if we can move forward with our extension of the North Jetty further west by about 400 to 500 feet, it will act as a solid weir to kind of not allow as much of our sand to go into the inlet as what we've experienced. We had the final postmortem on how much sand we lost with these two storm events, and it was over 6 million cubic yards across our entire county. That is unheard of within our coastal community.
That is a lot of sand.
That's a lot.
Appropriately used metaphor too, post-mortem. So, and even some of those big rocks, they were huge boulders really, but they moved.
The Corps is planning on, trying to take advantage of the material they have. If they can pull the large granite pieces, you've seen them falling on the lowboys with 2-3 rocks on a lowboy traveling to our fishing ramp. If they can salvage them from the channel of the inlet, they will be reused and stacked back onto the jetty.
Oh, that's definitely good.
Tell you, if there's one lesson to see from this, is the power of the ocean and how much it can do damage and move large objects around is impressive. Yeah,
you can say that again for sure. Ben Bartlett, Jessica Fentress with Public Works and Coastal, thank you so much for being here on the show today and for giving us the update. You're doing a heck of a job out there, and thank you. So with that, we'll close up Volusia Today. Thanks for listening. Take care, stay safe, and help your neighbors. Have a great today.
If you have a comment about Volusia Today, or if there is a topic you would like to hear featured, please contact Volusia County Community Information at 1-866-345-0345.